On a cold February morning in 2009, a woman walking her dog on Albuquerque's desolate West Mesa stumbled upon something that would shock a community and spiral into one of New Mexico's most haunting mysteries. A large bone protruded from the ground in a remote arroyo, a grim clue that would unravel the chilling story of 11 murdered women buried in shallow graves spread across the desert landscape and sparking one of New Mexico's most haunting cold case investigations. Before we dive deeper into this chilling case, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates on this and other true crime stories. Your support helps keep these important stories alive. The story began on February 2, 2009, when Christine Ross was walking her dog, Ruka, along a dirt trail on the West Mesa. Ruka dug excitedly at what appeared to be a large bone protruding from the ground. Concerned, Christine snapped a photo and texted her sister, a registered nurse, who suspected the bone was human. Christine immediately contacted the Albuquerque Police Department, who confirmed the grim reality. The bone was human. Further forensic excavation uncovered the remains of 11 women, many buried side by side in shallow graves, plus the remains of an unborn fetus. The victims ranged in age from 15 to 32 years, most were Hispanic, and many were linked to drugs and sex work, except for Jamie Barella, who had no known connection to these activities. One victim, Selania Edwards, stood out as a 15-year-old African-American runaway from Lawton, Oklahoma, the only victim from out of state. Michelle Valdez was 4 months pregnant when killed. Satellite imagery from 2003 to 2005 indicated disturbed soil and tire marks, suggesting clandestine burial activity. The last known burial was estimated to be in 2005, after which development encroached on the area. By 2006, natural and man-made disturbances exposed some remains, culminating in the discovery years later. This dark case exposed systemic issues related to violence against vulnerable women and has since driven ongoing investigative efforts and community calls for justice. If you have any information about the West Mesa murders or the remains found, please contact the Albuquerque Police Department at 505-768-2450 or Crime Stoppers anonymously at 505-843-STOP. Your information could bring justice to the victims and closure to their families. Please share this story to raise awareness. Every share brings us closer to justice and honors the memories of those lost. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. The 11 women and unborn child discovered on Albuquerque's West Mesa came from diverse backgrounds but shared tragic commonalities that made their lives vulnerable to the violence they endured. The victims' ages ranged from 15 to 32, painting a picture of young women caught in difficult circumstances. Most victims were Hispanic, with one notable exception. 15-year-old Selania Edwards, the only African-American victim, was a runaway from Lawton, Oklahoma. Her youthful age and out-of-state origin highlighted the tragic reach of the case beyond New Mexico's borders. Another exception was Jamie Barella, unique in that she was not linked to drug use or sex work, unlike many of the others. Michelle Valdez was 4 months pregnant at the time of her death, adding a harrowing layer to the tragedy. Many of the women were involved in sex work and struggled with substance abuse, factors which law enforcement says may have increased their vulnerability. The lives they led were marked by hardship but also resilience, each with a story that underscored the broad societal challenges faced by marginalized women. The victims' identities were later confirmed through DNA analysis and dental record comparisons over several years. This painstaking process allowed families long held in uncertainty to finally have names for their lost loved ones. Despite their differences, the victims collectively represent a group too often overlooked or marginalized, an issue that has deeply influenced the ongoing investigation and the community's drive for justice. Share the stories of these women and honor their memory by raising awareness about violence against vulnerable populations. The discovery on Albuquerque's West Mesa set in motion meticulous forensic examinations to unravel the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths. The 11 women and 1 unborn child were buried in shallow graves scattered over an arid, remote stretch of desert known as the West Mesa, a vast, treeless area on the outskirts of the city. The burial sites were hidden beneath layers of earth and debris, with some marked only by disturbed soil visible from satellite imagery. The graves were shallow, only a few feet deep, suggesting the perpetrator sought quick concealment but lacked the resources or time for elaborate hiding. Forensic anthropologists and medical examiners studied the skeletal remains to determine each victim's sex, age, and, critically, cause of death. The condition of the remains indicated all victims died from homicidal violence rather than natural causes or accidents. Many showed signs of blunt force trauma, strangulation, or defensive wounds. The presence of skeletal injuries and positioning suggested struggle and desperation before death. Toxicology results and medical history, although limited due to the remains state, reinforced the victim's prior vulnerabilities, including substance abuse. The unborn infant found with one victim, Michelle Valdez, underscored the brutality inflicted, marking a loss that extended beyond individual lives to the future they carried. Using soil stratigraphy and dental analysis, investigators estimated the burials occurred between 2001 and 2005. These findings correlated with satellite images that revealed tire tracks and soil disturbances on the West Mesa during the same period, raising questions about the possible involvement of vehicles in burying the victims. Throughout the forensic investigation, maintaining the integrity of the evidence was paramount. Given the challenges posed by environmental factors, erosion, wildlife disturbance, and earlier construction, the evidence was highly fragile, requiring expert excavation and preservation techniques. This forensic work laid the foundation for a deeper understanding of the case, highlighting not only the circumstances of each woman's tragic death, but also opening paths toward identifying the perpetrator and ultimately seeking justice. If this story resonates, please share your thoughts or questions and spread awareness to help the victims' stories reach as many people as possible. Your voice matters in the quest for justice. The discovery of human remains on Albuquerque's West Mesa in 2009 triggered what would become a complex and painstaking investigation into one of the most chilling cold cases in New Mexico's history. Following the initial report by Christine Ross, Albuquerque police deployed forensic teams to the site and rapidly confirmed the skeletal remains belonged to multiple victims. Over subsequent weeks, authorities uncovered 11 women and an unborn child buried secretly in shallow, makeshift graves. Investigators immediately recognized a pattern. The victims, predominantly young Hispanic women, were tied to drug use and prostitution, highlighting their vulnerability. One victim, Jamie Barella, stood apart with no known ties to these lifestyles. The only African-American victim, 15-year-old runaway Selania Edwards, was identified in late 2009 through dental records and familial reports, after being missing since 2003. The case prompted the formation of a special task force combining local police, forensic experts, and the FBI. Investigators used satellite imagery from 2003 to 2005 to analyze disturbed soil and vehicle tracks, helping to estimate the burial timeline and to understand how the perpetrators used the land. By December 2010, police released photos of several unidentified women who might be connected to the case, hoping public assistance would help identify more potential victims or witnesses. However, some women in the photos were later confirmed alive or unrelated. Certain persons of interest emerged during the investigation. Notably, Lorenzo Montoya, a local pressman living near the burial site, had a history of violent attacks on sex workers and was suspected due to proximity and behavior. Montoya was fatally shot in 2006 after killing a 19-year-old woman identified as Sharika Hill. Authorities believe the West Mesa killings may have stopped following his death, but no conclusive evidence has officially linked Montoya to the murders. Given the difficulty of witness cooperation and the transient lifestyles of the victims, the investigation faced numerous challenges. Still, detectives and forensic specialists remained committed to uncovering new evidence, offering rewards to encourage tips, and pursuing justice for the victims. If you know anything about this case or have information that could help, please share it with authorities. Your knowledge could be key to solving this mystery and helping families find closure. The search for answers in the West Mesa case continues, and every voice matters. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share it with friends and family, and subscribe so you never miss an update. Tap the notification bell to stay right here as we unravel more pieces of this haunting mystery. And if you have any clues or insights, please reach out to the Albuquerque police. Together, we can bring light to the shadows. Identifying the victims on the West Mesa was a painstaking and essential step toward justice. From 2009 onward, forensic experts and law enforcement worked tirelessly to piece together the identities of the 11 women and the unborn child. Dental records, DNA samples, and interviews with families formed the backbone of the identification process. In many cases, families had reported missing loved ones who fit the profiles uncovered, but conclusive proof was needed. DNA analysis, aided by advancements in forensic technology, became the primary tool. Genetic profiles from skeletal remains were compared against databases and familial samples. This allowed authorities to confirm identities and provide families with long-awaited answers. Despite these breakthroughs, the difficulties of this process were immense. The victims' marginalized status, many involved in sex work or transient lifestyles, meant records were sometimes sparse or inaccurate. In some cases, victims had never been officially reported missing. Each identification was met with mixed emotions: relief in naming a lost loved one and sorrow for the brutal circumstances revealed. The family's courage and cooperation were indispensable in advancing the investigation. Every name uncovered in this investigation is a victory for truth and memory. If these stories touch you, share your thoughts or questions in the comments below. Your insight and curiosity keep the search alive and honor the lives behind the names. The 11 women discovered on the West Mesa shared difficult and complex life stories that paint a vivid picture of their vulnerabilities and the harsh realities they faced. Most of the victims were young Hispanic women, many caught in cycles of substance abuse and sex work, lifestyles that often made them targets for violence. Michelle Valdez, one of the victims, was 4 months pregnant, a heartbreaking detail that underscores the profound loss experienced in this case. The youngest victim, 15-year-old Selenia Edwards, was a runaway from Oklahoma, the only non-New Mexican and the only African American among the victims. Her story highlights how issues of vulnerability and violence transcend state lines. Many families struggled to keep in contact with their loved ones as addiction and homelessness created barriers. Some victims disappeared without official missing persons reports, complicating identification and investigation. Social stigma surrounding sex work and substance use likely contributed to the silence and neglect surrounding these women. Jamie Barella stood out as different. There was no known connection between her and the world of drugs or sex work. Her death raised questions about whether she might have been a later or unrelated victim, adding layers to the mystery that law enforcement continues to investigate. By examining the victims' backgrounds, the investigation not only seeks justice but also shines a light on systemic social issues, poverty, addiction, marginalization, that contribute to cycles of violence and invisibility for many women. Understanding who these women were helps humanize them beyond the headlines. If you have thoughts or stories to share about the challenges marginalized communities face, join the conversation in the comments below. Your voice helps keep their legacy alive. The investigation into the West Mesa murders has faced numerous obstacles since the discovery of remains in 2009. The sheer number of victims, environmental factors, and the passage of years made collecting and preserving forensic evidence difficult. Many bodies were buried in shallow graves scattered over a 92-acre area, and natural erosion plus development disturbed the site. One major challenge was the transient and marginalized nature of many victims. Several women involved struggled with addiction and sex work, resulting in poor documentation and often no official missing persons reports. This hindered identification and limited witness cooperation during the investigation. State laws also complicated evidence processing. For example, DNA clearance was limited by regulations prohibiting the inclusion of deceased suspects' DNA in national databases. Lorenzo Montoya, a prime suspect and local man with violent criminal history, was killed in 2006, prior to the unearthing of the West Mesa graves. Because he died before charges could be filed, his DNA could not be added to key databases, restricting the ability to conclusively link him to the murders. Moreover, the investigation wrestled with theories involving multiple perpetrators, human trafficking, and the possibility that some victims might have disappeared under entirely separate circumstances. The lack of eyewitnesses and physical evidence epitomized the challenges of any cold case, amplified by social stigma and community fear. Despite these hurdles, law enforcement formed a specialized task force collaborating with the FBI and forensic experts. Continuous efforts over more than a decade resulted in partial victim identifications, sporadic leads, and new technology application, including enhanced DNA analysis techniques. The challenges faced artfully demonstrate the difficulty in solving complex crimes affecting vulnerable populations, underscoring the importance of cooperation and community engagement in the pursuit of justice. Cold cases like the West Mesa Murders thrive with public support. If this story resonates, please discuss it, share widely, and help keep the memory and quest for justice alive. Among the various persons of interest in the West Mesa Murders, Lorenzo Montoya stands out as the prime suspect. Montoya was a local man living less than 3 miles from the burial site, a pressman at a nearby printing company who had a violent criminal history, particularly involving attacks on sex workers. Montoya's criminal record included multiple arrests for violent assaults. Co-workers and acquaintances reported hearing him boast about killing women and burying them on the West Mesa. His connection to the case was reinforced by the presence of dirt trails leading from his trailer park directly to the burial site, suggesting he had access to the area. In 2006, Montoya fatally strangled 19-year-old Sharika Hill, a sex worker, in a brutal attack inside his trailer. Hill's boyfriend intervened, shooting Montoya dead as he attempted to place her body in his car trunk. Police acknowledged the viciousness of the crime and noted the killings on the West Mesa stopped after Montoya's death. Despite these strong suspicions, Montoya was never officially charged in connection with the West Mesa murders. Current laws restrict DNA testing of suspects unless they are arrested, and Montoya's death in 2006 meant his DNA had not been entered into federal databases vital for linking evidence. Legislative efforts are underway to change these laws to include deceased suspects' DNA to help close cases like this. Investigators continue to probe Montoya's connections and possible involvement, but without definitive proof or confession, the case remains open. If Montoya was the killer, his death denies families the chance for formal justice, though many believe he was responsible for the tragic loss of these women. If the story of Lorenzo Montoya and the West Mesa murders moves you, please like, share, and subscribe for updates as this investigation continues. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to stay informed. And remember, if you have any information, no matter how small, your voice could help bring justice and peace to families still searching for answers. In response to the complexity and scale of the West Mesa murders, Albuquerque Police Department formed a specialized cold case task force. This multi-agency team combined local detectives, forensic experts, and FBI agents dedicated exclusively to uncovering new leads and re-examining all evidence. The task force utilized cutting-edge forensic technology, including advanced DNA profiling, geographic profiling, and victimology studies, aiming to piece together the fragmented puzzle of the case. Satellite imagery analysis became a powerful investigative tool, revealing the hidden patterns of disturbance on the West Mesa between 2003 and 2005. Beyond scientific methods, the task force embraced community engagement and victim advocacy. Public appeals, media collaborations, and partnerships with grassroots organizations sought to raise awareness and encourage witnesses or informants to come forward. Despite the elapsed time and challenges, the task force's ongoing efforts symbolize a unified determination to solve these crimes and provide long overdue answers for the victims' families. Their work continues to evolve with advances in forensic science and legislative support for cold case investigations. In recent years, progress in forensic science and changes in legislation have brought renewed hope to solving the West Mesa murders and other cold cases in New Mexico. One major hurdle until now was the law restricting entry of DNA from deceased suspects into national databases. House Bill 340, currently under consideration in the New Mexico legislature, seeks to change that. The bill would permit DNA samples from individuals who died before charges were filed to be entered into the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. This would include suspects who were in prison at their time of death, or those released before DNA laws were in place. This legislation directly addresses cases like the West Mesa Murders, where the primary suspect, Lorenzo Montoya, died before facing charges. Without his DNA in the database, linking him conclusively to the murders was legally impossible. HB 340's passage could allow law enforcement to test Montoya's DNA against evidence from the case and possibly close this tragic chapter. Advances in forensic technology also play a vital role. Improved DNA extraction techniques, even from degraded samples, enhance investigators' ability to identify victims and suspects. Satellite and geographic profiling aid in reconstructing crime scenes and timelines, providing new avenues for investigations stalled for years. Authorities emphasize that the goal is not only prosecutions but also providing closure and answers to grieving families. The combination of legal reform, scientific innovation, and persistent investigative work represents a beacon of hope in the West Mesa case and many others across the state. If this progress intrigues you, share your thoughts or questions about forensic science and cold case legislation below. Knowledge and support from the public propel these efforts forward. The West Mesa Murders case garnered significant media attention following the discovery of remains in 2009. Local, state, and national news outlets covered the story extensively, turning the harrowing tragedy into a widely known cold case. Early coverage focused on the grim facts: 11 women plus an unborn child found buried in shallow graves in a desolate patch of Albuquerque's West Mesa. The victims' backgrounds, many involved with drugs and sex work, prompted difficult discussions about societal neglect and the vulnerability of marginalized populations. Over time, journalists, true crime podcasters, and documentary filmmakers began highlighting the human stories of the victims and their families, shifting coverage from sensationalism to advocacy. Some media sought to raise awareness about systemic failures related to violence against women, social services, and law enforcement resources. Despite these efforts, many families and community advocates have expressed frustration with the media portrayal, concerned that the victims were stigmatized or overlooked due to their life circumstances. Several journalists emphasized the importance of respectful storytelling, focusing on dignity and justice rather than judgment. High-profile documentaries and true crime series are now in development to explore the case in greater depth, including accounts from investigators, family members, and witnesses. These projects aim to keep public attention alive and put pressure on authorities to solve the case. Public campaigns, such as vigils, community forums, and social media movements, have further amplified the call for answers and justice. The ongoing media spotlight continues to play a crucial role in seeking accountability and remembering the victims. If this story moves you, please share it to spread awareness. Engage respectfully in the conversation and keep these women's memories alive. Your voice helps fuel justice. As of 2025, the West Mesa Bone Collector case remains officially unsolved, but the Albuquerque Police Department continues to actively pursue leads and support legislative changes that could prove pivotal. The department's prime suspect remains Lorenzo Montoya, who died in 2006 after murdering a known victim outside the West Mesa killings. Without Montoya's DNA in national databases, investigators have been hampered in conclusively tying him to the murders. However, the proposed DNA legislation discussed in previous parts is gaining traction and could soon enable testing of DNA from deceased suspects like Montoya. This new law, if passed, could be a game-changer for the case. Investigators also continue to follow up on 8 women who went missing between 2003 and 2006, any of whom may be additional victims connected to the bone collector. The $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest stands as a crucial incentive for witnesses or informants. Families of the victims still seek answers and justice, emphasizing the need for sustained media attention and community support. Police acknowledge significant challenges remain, from degradation of evidence to reluctance of witnesses, but remain hopeful that advancing technology and improved cooperation will yield breakthroughs. The case also serves as a powerful reminder of systemic issues affecting vulnerable populations, inspiring ongoing advocacy and reform efforts. With perseverance, legal reforms, and forensic advancements, there is cautious optimism that the West Mesa Bone Collector's identity may one day be confirmed, bringing closure to families and the community. If you hold any information about the West Mesa Murders, please contact the Albuquerque Police Department at 505-768-2450. Comment below. Your engagement keeps these stories alive, supports the victims' families, and fuels the search for justice. The West Mesa Murders case has resonated far beyond Albuquerque, touching national and international audiences as a symbol of the ongoing fight against violence targeting vulnerable women. The discovery of 11 women and one unborn child buried in a remote desert highlighted deep issues of marginalization, systemic neglect, and challenges in cold case investigations. Nationally, the case has prompted discussions about gaps in law enforcement resources and the need for updated legislation. Albuquerque Police Department, working alongside lawmakers, has pushed for bills that would allow deceased suspects' DNA to be entered into databases like CODIS. Such changes could revolutionize cold case investigations not only in New Mexico but across the United States, increasing the likelihood of solving decades-old cases. The case has also drawn attention to the broader issue of violence against sex workers and marginalized communities. It joins a series of high-profile cases that challenge cultural and legal systems to prioritize these victims with dignity and urgency. Global true crime audiences have also engaged with the story through documentaries, podcasts, and media reporting, ensuring that pressure remains on authorities and that the victims' stories do not fade into obscurity. Advocacy groups use the West Mesa case to illustrate the intersection of social services, criminal justice, and human rights, connecting it to international struggles for women's safety and justice for underserved populations. The ongoing investigation and legislative efforts continue to inspire hope that justice will one day be achieved, symbolizing a commitment to truth, accountability, and remembrance on a global scale. If the story of the West Mesa Bone Collector weighs on your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on all developments and documentaries. Your awareness and voice are essential in advocating for justice and change for these victims, and the discovery of the West Mesa Murders deeply shook Albuquerque's community, and the legacy of the 11 women and unborn child continues to inspire remembrance and activism. In 2017, the New Mexico State Senate passed Memorial 113, honoring several of the named victims: Victoria Chavez, Gina Michelle Valdez, Cinnamon Elks, Julie Cindy Nieto, and the 9 Jane Does from the West Mesa mass grave. This formal recognition underscored the community's commitment to remembering those lost and advocating for justice. Families, local advocates, and community organizations hold annual vigils and memorials on the anniversary of the discovery in February. These gatherings provide a space to honor the victims, support grieving relatives, and raise awareness about violence against marginalized women. Memorial art projects, including murals and installations, have been created in Albuquerque to immortalize the victims' stories visually. These works emphasize dignity, humanize the victims, and call for social change. Grassroots organizations led by survivors of violence and affected families continue to push for improved protections for sex workers, expanded social services, and better law enforcement support to prevent future tragedies. These responses reflect a resilient community refusing to let these women become forgotten statistics. Instead, their lives and deaths fuel ongoing movements for justice and compassion. The harrowing discovery of the West Mesa Murders has not only driven a relentless investigation but also sparked significant advocacy and calls for reform to better protect vulnerable populations and improve law enforcement responses. Families of the victims and community advocates have been vocal about the need for respectful treatment and transparency from police. Many criticized initial law enforcement attitudes that focused heavily on the victims' involvement in drugs and sex work, often overlooking their humanity and urgency for justice. Advocates emphasize that regardless of background, every victim deserves dignity and thorough investigation. Legal activists and victim advocates push for reforms including improved missing persons protocols to ensure prompt, respectful, and proactive investigations, enhanced police communication and notification processes with families, allowing for timely updates and greater transparency. Legislative changes like New Mexico's proposed House Bill 340 to allow DNA profiles from deceased suspects to be entered into federal databases, crucial for cold case breakthroughs. increased funding and resources for cold case units specializing in vulnerable and overlooked victims, community programs focusing on prevention, victim support, and harm reduction targeting those at high risk such as sex workers and substance users. These advocacy efforts aim to reduce vulnerability through systemic changes, ensuring that future disappearances and murders receive the prompt attention and resolution currently missing for the West Mesa victims. The ongoing struggle to balance compassion, justice, and resource allocation highlights broader societal challenges, but the West Mesa case has become a catalyst driving conversations and reforms on multiple levels. If this story moved you, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to support awareness and advocacy. Your voice helps demand justice and reform for all victims. As of 2025, the Albuquerque Police Department remains committed to solving the West Mesa murders. The case, now 16 years old since the discovery of remains, continues to challenge investigators but also fuel hope, thanks to advancing forensic science and legislative efforts. APD supports new bills that would allow DNA from deceased suspects to enter the National CODIS database, potentially unlocking key evidence. This law could finally allow testing against prime suspect Lorenzo Montoya, who died in 2006 but remains unlinked by DNA due to current state law restrictions. Community members and families of victims express ongoing pain and frustration over the slow progress, but appreciate the renewed focus and transparency from authorities. The $100,000 reward offered for information remains active, underscoring the importance of public involvement. The case has also inspired a true crime documentary currently in production, which aims to educate and maintain public awareness, driving further advocacy and information flow. The APD emphasizes the necessity of community support and tips to break open cold cases like this one. Meanwhile, families continue their quest for closure, holding vigils and pushing for justice. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to follow updates. Your voice, your shares, and your tips could make a difference. Help bring justice to these forgotten victims. The West Mesa Bone Collector case has inspired several documentaries and film projects, aiming to shed light on the unsolved horrors while honoring the victims' memories. One notable recent project is the film Boneyard, directed by Asif Akbar and produced with involvement from Lionsgate. It dramatizes the events surrounding the discovery of the remains and follows the lives of victims and their families. The film, released in 2024, sparked complex reactions. While many welcomed the renewed public attention, some families expressed frustration over a lack of prior consultation and felt the emotional wounds were reopened without adequate support. In 2025, a true crime documentary series titled Buried Secrets, The West Mesa Murders premiered, featuring interviews with victims' families, eyewitnesses, law enforcement officers, and experts. This series combines archival footage with narratives from those who lived through the tragedy, offering an in-depth exploration of the case's complexities. These storytelling efforts strive to humanize the victims beyond their tragic ends. Family members share personal stories emphasizing their loved ones' personalities, dreams, and challenges. Through respectful storytelling, the documentaries build awareness about the dangers faced by marginalized women and the importance of justice. Public response to these projects includes increased community support, tips shared with law enforcement, and amplified advocacy for legislative and systemic changes. These narratives remind viewers that these were real women, not mere crime statistics, and reinforce the unyielding quest for truth and closure. Law enforcement officials involved in the West Mesa Bone Collector case emphasized the complexity and enduring pain of this investigation. APD Commander Kyle Hartsock, who oversees the task force assigned to the case, has shared candid insights into the challenges officers face. Hartsock highlights that the prime suspect, Lorenzo Montoya, remains a critical focus despite his death in 2006. Montoya's violent history and the cessation of disappearances following his death make him a compelling person of interest. However, due to current New Mexico law, his DNA cannot be tested against the evidence since DNA testing requires a live suspect to be entered into the National CODIS database. The police department has actively collaborated with state legislators to pass bills allowing DNA samples from deceased suspects on a case-by-case judicial approval basis, to be entered into CODIs. This change could be crucial in either affirming or eliminating Montoya's connection to the murders. Investigators also monitor several women missing from 2003 to 2006, possibly linked to the West Mesa case, hoping new information may still emerge with public assistance. The APD acknowledges that witness cooperation is limited, with many reluctant to come forward due to fear or stigma. Yet, investigators remain dedicated, leveraging forensic advances alongside community outreach. In interviews, detectives express empathy for the victims' families, understanding the trauma of decades-long uncertainty. They stress that any viable lead or tip is vital and encourage anyone with knowledge to reach out confidentially. This ongoing combination of law enforcement persistence, legislative advocacy, and public partnership remains the bedrock of hope for case resolution. If this case stays on your mind, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell. Your support and any information you can share are invaluable to continued efforts. The families of the West Mesa victims have endured heartbreak and frustration over the many years since their loved ones disappeared and were later found in shallow graves on Albuquerque's West Mesa. Their testimonies reveal both personal loss and challenges navigating the complexities of the investigation. Jane Perea, mother of 15-year-old Jamie Barella, who was found with her cousin Evelyn Salazar, recalls the harrowing moments before her daughter's disappearance. Jamie was last seen in 2004, leaving the Wilson Middle School park, telling her mother, "I'll be back," a promise sadly unfulfilled. Perea expressed deep disappointment in police communication, stating, "They don't even contact us. Nothing. Whatever I hear through the grapevine." Isabel Candelaria, mother of Monica Candelaria, recalls reporting early suspicions about her daughter's disappearance in 2003. She informed investigators about a neighbor who hinted at Monica being killed and buried on the mesa. Despite the desperate search by her family in the area, the remains were only found years later. Isabel expressed a haunting hope that earlier discovery might have saved other lives. Many families felt the case was neglected due to the victims' backgrounds. Many women were involved in sex work and struggled with addiction. This perception fostered mistrust and dissatisfaction with law enforcement and media, which often emphasized the victims' lifestyles over their humanity. Families regularly gather for vigils and public forums, insisting on justice and transparency. Their advocacy has helped keep the case in public consciousness, prompting billboard campaigns with photos and tip lines, community vigils, and participation in documentaries. Many family members continue to speak out against stigma and neglect, demanding the investigation remain a priority. As one mother stated, "They want to forget this, but I refuse to let that happen." If these stories touch your heart, please share, discuss, and support continued efforts for justice. Subscribing and engaging helps keep the victims' memories alive and pressure on law enforcement. As the West Mesa Bone Collector investigation reaches its 16th year in 2025, the Albuquerque Police Department remains actively engaged in seeking justice for the 11 women and unborn child found buried in the West Mesa Desert. A major focus lies on new proposed legislation that could transform this cold case. Current state law prohibits DNA from deceased suspects being entered into the National Combined DNA Index System, CODIs. This legal gap has hindered definitive conclusions about prime suspect Lorenzo Montoya, who died in 2006 after killing a sex worker. Investigators believe Montoya may be linked to multiple victims but cannot confirm this without DNA comparison. APD Commander Kyle Hartsock has publicly supported bills that would allow, with judicial approval, DNA samples from deceased suspects like Montoya to enter CODIs. These measures would provide law enforcement with powerful new forensic tools in solving this and other unresolved crimes in New Mexico. Families of victims, such as Jane Perea, mother of 15-year-old Jamie Barella, who disappeared in 2004, continue to voice their pain over the slow progress and limited communication from authorities. Despite this, they remain hopeful that advances in law and technology will eventually yield answers. Public awareness campaigns, true crime documentaries, and reward offers emphasize the shared responsibility in helping solve the case. Authorities encourage anyone with information to come forward confidentially. Through legislative advocacy, forensic advancement, and community involvement, hope persists that the West Mesa Bone Collector will one day be identified and justice served. If this story moves you, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to stay updated and support continued investigations. Tips can be submitted anonymously to the Albuquerque Police Department at 505-768-2450 or Crime Stoppers at 505-843-STOP. Your voice matters. Help bring justice and closure to these forgotten victims. The West Mesa Bone Collector case, despite its age and challenges, continues to benefit from advances in forensic science, offering new hope to investigators committed to solving these tragic murders. Though the initial investigation faced limited DNA evidence directly linking to a suspect, recent progress in forensic techniques has allowed extraction and analysis of degraded DNA from remains previously thought unusable. Techniques such as next-generation sequencing, NGS, enable investigators to generate usable genetic profiles from highly damaged samples, potentially opening doors to new matches. Forensic genealogy, which combines DNA analysis with genealogical databases, also presents promising possibilities. This technique, successful in recent years for resolving cold cases nationwide, could identify distant relatives of unknown suspects or victims, providing crucial new leads. Enhanced geographic profiling and 3D crime scene reconstructions using satellite imagery and advanced surveying tools allow investigators to better understand burial patterns and timelines, helping to pinpoint potential disposal sites and suspects' behaviors. Technological advances in isotope analysis can reveal the geographic origins and movements of victims and suspects, enriching victimology profiles and offering investigative insights into the killer's hunting grounds or travel patterns. Law enforcement agencies, including the Albuquerque Police Department and the FBI, have integrated these emerging forensic methods into the ongoing investigation, recognizing that the fusion of science, technology, and persistent detective work is essential in unraveling this decade-spanning mystery. Stay updated as science and investigation forge paths to new breakthroughs. Your attention and any tips may be the key to unlocking this cold case. The tragic West Mesa murders have underscored the importance of community and survivor support initiatives, which play a vital role in aiding families and vulnerable populations alike. Several grassroots organizations in Albuquerque aim to provide support to women at high risk of violence, including those struggling with addiction, homelessness, and involvement in sex work, conditions shared by many of the victims. One such group, Street Safe New Mexico, focuses on enhancing safety and providing resources to women living and working on the streets. They offer outreach programs, counseling, and education to empower women and reduce vulnerability. Crossroads for Women, another local nonprofit, offers services such as rehabilitation, job training, and life skills development for women emerging from incarceration or caught in cycles of poverty and addiction. Notably, some West Mesa victims had brief connections to these programs, highlighting the ongoing need for such resources. Community vigils, memorials, and public forums help families find solidarity amid grief and demand justice. These events create platforms for survivors and families to share stories, break stigma, and raise awareness about systemic failures that allowed such tragedies. Public awareness efforts also include advocacy for better law enforcement protocols, supportive legislation, and increased funding for social services, aiming to prevent future violence. Together, these support networks and community initiatives foster resilience and healing, while emphasizing the urgent necessity of addressing the root causes of vulnerability that the West Mesa case tragically exposed. If this story inspires compassion, share this video and join community efforts advocating for victims' rights and survivor support. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay connected with ongoing stories and updates. Recent legislative efforts in New Mexico aim to address gaps in forensic science capabilities that hinder the resolution of cold cases like the West Mesa murders. A significant focus has been on bills that would allow law enforcement to include DNA evidence from deceased suspects into a national database, even if those individuals were never formally charged or convicted. Currently, state law insists that DNA be entered into databases like CODIS only after a person is formally booked or charged. This limits the ability to compare evidence against suspects who are already deceased or never prosecuted, an obstacle that prevented linking Lorenzo Montoya, the primary suspect, to the West Mesa victims, since he died in 2006 before DNA collection and testing were mandated. A legislative proposal, House Bill 340, has garnered wide support from police agencies, including Albuquerque Police Department, which sees it as essential for solving cold cases. The bill would permit the input of DNA from individuals who passed away before being charged, with judicial oversight, thus expanding the ability to connect evidence with suspects posthumously. If enacted, this law could lead to breakthroughs not only in the West Mesa case, but in dozens of unresolved homicides and sexual assaults across New Mexico. It would also help identify unknown victims through familial DNA matching, providing closure to families who have long-awaited answers. Additionally, lawmakers are pushing for legislation to expand the database to include DNA from more individuals, especially those who have been incarcerated or have died while in custody, regardless of the timing of their crimes. This would significantly increase the likelihood of matching evidence to suspects in cold cases. Overall, these legislative efforts demonstrate a committed move toward justice that relies heavily on advanced forensic technology and modern legislation. They offer hope that future cases, possibly even the West Mesa Murders, will finally reach resolution through legal and scientific progress. If you believe in justice and the importance of forensic technology, support legislation reforms in your community. Share this information, spread awareness, and stay engaged. Your voice can help propel justice forward. The West Mesa Bone Collector case has sparked various community awareness campaigns aimed at honoring the victims, supporting families, and urging continued law enforcement focus. Groups like Street Safe New Mexico hold annual vigils on the Discovery Anniversary, where women who frequent the same high-risk areas as the victims leave notes and tributes tied to fences near the burial site. These campaigns enable marginalized community members to express solidarity and keep the victims' memories alive. Public billboards featuring victim photos and tip lines have been established in Albuquerque and nearby areas to increase community involvement in providing potential leads. Advocacy organizations emphasize the importance of combating stigma around sex work and addiction, which historically impeded attention and empathy for the victims. Awareness campaigns focus on reshaping public perceptions and demanding systemic changes for better protection and respect of vulnerable populations. Social media movements and true crime documentaries have amplified these efforts, creating broader platforms for dialogue and education about violence against marginalized women. Such community engagement keeps pressure on law enforcement to prioritize these cold cases and reminds the public that justice delayed must not be justice denied. If the story of the West Mesa Bone Collector compels you, help spread awareness by sharing this video and joining discussions that respect and humanize victims. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to support ongoing justice efforts. If you have information, no matter how small, contact Albuquerque Police Department at 505-768-2450 or Crime Stoppers at 505-843-STOP. Every voice makes a difference. Despite years of investigation and public attention, many crucial questions about the West Mesa Bone Collector case remain unanswered, fueling speculation and theories. One central unresolved question is the true identity of the killer. The primary suspect, Lorenzo Montoya, lived near the burial site and had a history of violence against women. However, his death in 2006 and the current prohibition on entering deceased suspects' DNA into federal databases limit the ability to conclusively link him to the murders. Another lingering mystery is whether a single individual committed all these murders or multiple perpetrators were involved. The coordinated burial site with carefully spaced shallow graves suggests a methodical approach possibly indicative of a single serial killer. However, some experts speculate that a pair or group could have worked together given the volume and time span of the killings. The involvement of criminal networks, particularly human trafficking rings, remains a theory but is unproven. The victims' links to drugs and sex work make this a plausible angle investigators have considered. Additional unknowns include whether there are more victims buried in undiscovered sites nearby or elsewhere. Satellite imagery indicated disturbed soil spots, but excavations have been limited. The precise victim count may also be higher than 11 plus the unborn child, as other women went missing in the area around the same time. Identifying remains and connecting missing persons remains crucial. Finally, law enforcement continues to face challenges in gathering witness cooperation, with many potential informants reluctant to come forward due to fear or stigma. These unresolved elements underscore the difficulties in cracking complex cold cases and the necessity for advances in forensic science, legislative support, and community trust. If you have any information related to these mysteries or the West Mesa Bone Collector case, please contact the Albuquerque Police Department at 505-768-2450 or Crime Stoppers anonymously at 505-843-STOP. Sharing this story helps keep the search for truth alive. From 2001 to 2005, 11 women, mostly young, Hispanic, many struggling with addiction and sex work, vanished in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Their disappearances went largely unnoticed until 2009 when Christine Ross, walking her dog on Albuquerque's West Mesa, discovered a bone protruding from the dirt. This discovery triggered investigations that uncovered 11 shallow graves scattered across 92 acres, containing the remains of these women and one unborn child. The ages ranged from 15 to 32 years old, confirming a chilling pattern of crimes spanning years. The victims' identities emerged slowly through dental records, forensic analysis, and persistent police work. The stories of Jamie Barella, Evelyn Salazar, Monica Candelaria, and others humanized the tragic losses and tugged at the community's conscience. The prime suspect, Lorenzo Montoya, a violent man living near the burial site, died in 2006 after killing a sex worker. Though circumstantial evidence points toward him, legal and forensic challenges, including DNA testing limitations on deceased suspects, have so far prevented a formal resolution. In the years following, Albuquerque's police department has worked tirelessly, applying new forensic technologies and pushing for legislation to aid the investigation. Families and communities continue to seek justice, holding vigils and advocating for awareness and reform to protect vulnerable populations. Though the West Mesa Bone Collector remains unidentified, this haunting case serves as a stark reminder of systemic vulnerabilities and the ongoing need for vigilance, compassion, and justice. The West Mesa Bone Collector murders left a profound imprint on Albuquerque and the wider community, exposing deeper societal issues of violence, marginalization, and systemic neglect. The discovery of 11 women and one unborn child buried in shallow graves revealed a dark undercurrent of vulnerability faced by women involved in drugs, sex work, and poverty. The case spotlighted how societal indifference and stigmatization contributed to slow responses and under-investigation, prompting public outcry for justice and reform. Community memorials, vigils, and art installations have since become spaces for remembrance and healing, emphasizing dignity for victims often dismissed or forgotten. Activist groups advocate fiercely for marginalized populations, urging systemic changes in policing, social services, and public health to prevent future tragedies. The case also inspired media coverage, true crime documentaries, and legislative efforts, all aiming to bring awareness and accountability. The unresolved nature of the case continues to haunt Albuquerque's conscience, serving as a stark reminder of the consequences of societal neglect. Culturally, this tragedy has fueled dialogue about protecting vulnerable women, challenging stereotypes, and fostering inclusive communities where every life is valued and justice accessible. Ultimately, the West Mesa Bone Collector case is not just a story about loss and mystery. It is a call to action, urging society to confront its shortcomings and commit to lasting change in honor of those lost. Beyond the headlines and crime scene investigations, behind the unsettling label of the West Mesa Bone Collector lie the deeply human stories of 11 women and an unborn child whose lives were tragically cut short. These were daughters, sisters, nieces, friends, individuals with dreams, struggles, and memories cherished by those who loved them. Take Jamie Barella, a bright and spirited 15-year-old girl whose disappearance left a family shattered by grief. Jamie was a student at Albuquerque's Wilson Middle School, a young girl who loved music, dancing, and spending time with her cousins. On the day she vanished, Jamie told her mother Jane a simple, innocent promise. "Mommy, I'll be back." Those words haunt Jane, an echo of hope forever frozen in time. Jane recalls her daughter's laughter, the warmth in her eyes, and her plans to build a better future. Jamie, like many others, was struggling with the harsh realities of adolescence complicated by addiction and unstable housing. But to her family, she was much more than danger or risk. She was a vibrant soul deserving love and protection. Jamie's cousin, Evelyn Salazar, was another life silenced too soon. Evelyn was known among friends for her infectious laugh and resilient spirit despite facing the daily torment of addiction. A lover of music and the arts, Evelyn had dreams of rehabilitation and hope. She cared deeply for her pet dog and held close the shards of a life she wanted to reclaim. Her family remembers her not as a victim but as a fighter, someone caught in circumstances beyond her control but who never lost her humanity. Monica Candelaria's story illuminates the courage it takes to survive trauma. A young woman whose struggles with drug addiction and domestic violence painted a painful portrait. Monica had dreams of rebuilding her life. Her mother, Isabel, shares memories of a girl with a fierce love for her younger brother, someone who yearned for safety and dignity. Before her disappearance, Monica confided fears about neighbors and potential dangers, offering clues that were sadly not heeded. Isabel's grief is compounded by the frustration of unanswered questions and the ache of lost possibilities. Then there is Shalana Irsik, a young woman adults called Sunshine Shalana because of her bright personality. Despite fighting addiction, she was described as compassionate and generous, always willing to help others. Her absence left a void not only within her family but the wider community that knew her. The heartbreaking tapestry of these women's lives threads through facts and statistics but demands more than summation. They walked Albuquerque's streets, navigated complex social challenges, and yearned for respect and safety. They sat in classrooms, danced at family gatherings, cradled babies, and dreamed of better days. Even as their lives were vulnerable to predations hidden in plain sight. The unborn child, whose remains were found with the women, represents the cruel interruption of future potential and amplifies the heartbreak experienced by families. By remembering these women not just as victims but as full human beings, with personalities, complexities, and stories, we honor their memories beyond the cold facts. Their stories are calls to empathy, reminders of social flaws that tragically rendered them invisible to many. This remembrance challenges listeners to reflect on systemic inequalities, the dangers facing marginalized women, and the urgent need for societal changes that regard the vulnerable with dignity and urgency. Each woman left behind mourners who carry the weight of memory and unfulfilled dreams, families who advocate tirelessly for justice, recognition, and change. As the story unfolds, their lives become the foundation for the pressing need to solve the mystery of the West Mesa Bone Collector, not only for closure but to prevent future tragedies. Honor the victims by keeping their stories alive. Share, talk, and advocate for justice, dignity, and protection for all vulnerable communities. Subscribe and stay engaged with ongoing efforts and updates. Justice must never be forgotten. Thank you for joining this journey into the haunting mystery of the West Mesa Bone Collector. Beneath the grim facts lie the stories of real women with families who still hope for justice and closure. Remember, every tip, no matter how small, matters. If you have any information about this case, contact the Albuquerque Police Department or Crime Stoppers anonymously. Together, community vigilance and compassion can help bring light to the darkest cases. Let us honor the memory of these women by never forgetting and by standing for justice, dignity, and protection for all vulnerable lives. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep seeking the truth. If the story moved you, please share it to keep awareness alive. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay connected with updates and ongoing advocacy.